The day is June 21st, 2021. The time is 4:13. But before I tell you where we are, there's a little bit of backstory to explain what I'm doing here. A couple of years ago, I asked myself a question. What would it take to organize the longest possible daylight day in Ireland? First of all, it obviously has to be on one of the solstice days, for example, June 21st. There's a couple of things that I have going for me. Ireland is not that big that crossing it would be a problem. And also, we're on an island, which means the extreme points are likely to be available as they're going to be on the shoreline. And there's nothing high on the island that's going to interfere with the sun or cause any discrepancies. But before I explain where the journey starts, let me ask you a question. What extreme points are needed for the longest daylight day? Is it the northmost point? Is it eastmost and westmost points? So you can travel coast to coast and follow the sun. Is it southmost point? Is it your answer here? Choose now. If you chose the northmost point, we're in the Malin Head, County Donegal, which is about here. The eastmost point of the whole island is Burr Point, which is about here. It's in County Down, but it is part of the Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. So because of coronavirus, we have to exclude it. The eastmost point of Republic of Ireland is Wicklow Head. So we have to zoom a little bit down. And Wicklow Head is located right here in County Wicklow. The westmost point is Dunmore Head in Dingle, County Kerry, which is going to be around here. And then the southmost point is approximately Mizen Head in County Cork. You can see it about here. So the reason people in the North Hemisphere think about south when they think about the sun is because they associate it with warmer climate and a little bit more stable weather. However, from the astronomical point of view, the closer you get to the equator, the smaller is the difference between the shortest day and the longest day. So if you're looking at the longest day specifically, then south is not very interesting. On the other hand, if you look at the north, the difference between the shortest day and the longest day is going to be the highest. In the extreme case, as you get close to the pole, you have half a year of the day and half a year of the night. The reason people think about the eastmost point and the westmost point is intuitively the sun is moving from east to west. But this is true if you pick a very specific point. If you look at the island as a whole and you try to pick a point where the sun is rising the earliest and the point where the sun sets the latest, it's a little bit more complicated than that. To demonstrate what is going on, I'm holding here a grapefruit, which is wrapped in paper, the same way a Mercator projection would wrap the Earth. We have a couple of matchsticks holding this together and representing North Pole and South Pole and rotational axes. To the right of me, I have a flashlight, which is simulating the sun. If there was no tilt to rotational axis, it would always stay perpendicular to the plane of orbit, and the line between the shadow and the light would always pass through the poles and not change with the Earth orbiting around the sun. So here, the light will stay on the right side and the shadow would stay on the left side. But because Earth has a tilt to its rotational axis, the configuration is going to change as the Earth is orbiting the sun. It will go through different states. To capture what's going on, I'm going to grab a marker. I'm going to tilt it away from me. And I'm gonna mark down the line between the shadow and the light. And here in this configuration, it's gonna go through the poles. Let me just light a little bit. So I'm angling it away and I'm drawing the line between the light and the shadow. So it will pass approximately here and then there. To remember where the shadow is, I'll add the hatch marks to the left side and I'm gonna call this configuration E. Now, through the magic of editing, I have a grapefruit wrapped in a new piece of paper. And instead of angling it away from me, I'm gonna angle it to the right, towards the sun. And one thing that you might notice is that there's an area around the North Pole which is now fully lit. And I'm gonna draw the line between the light and the shadow. So it goes like this. I'm gonna add the hatch marks to the left side to remember that this is the shadow. And I'm gonna call this configuration S. So conveniently, I have a printed out map here, the same Mercator projection as the one that I used, which means that we can basically just overlay them. And then here is the first piece of paper, the one that I called E. The line between the shadow and the light are basically vertical. And here to the right, we have our shadow. And you can imagine as the Earth is rotating, it is transitioning and you have this vertical line between the light and the shadow, which is moving throughout. And the reason I called it E is because this is the equinox. This is the day of the year, which occurs twice a year, when the amount of light and the amount of shadow that each point gets are the same. So we can move this away and let's compare this to the other configuration that we have. You can see that the line between the light and the shadow here is more complicated. And the reason I called this S is because this represents solstice. For Northern Hemisphere here, it means the longest day of the year. So let's mark down the shadow and let's try to imagine how this looks like as it is transitioning throughout. You may notice, for example, the shadow area on the South Pole and the light area on the North Pole. But to demonstrate better what's going on with the specific countries, we'll need something better because it's going to heavily depend on where the country is, because it is going to determine the angle of this transition. So conveniently, I have a more precise cutout of the shape of the shadow, which is to the scale of this map. And for simplicity, we'll take a look at something really large, for example, Africa. And you can see how you can use this to determine the extreme points. So for example, this is going to be the point that's getting the sun the last, and then this is going to be the one that's getting sun first. And as we're transitioning away, you can see we have another extreme point here, and then another extreme point here. So now if we look at the Ireland, we can see that it's fairly far up north, and the angle there is far from vertical. In fact, it is actually quite steep, which means that the extreme points are not going to be eastmost and westmost. But to find them, we're going to transition to a bigger map. So now that we understand how the shadow is moving, we need to find our respective points. So if this is how the shadow is moving, the first point is going to be somewhere around here. But the problem is that it is in Northern Ireland, which we can't enter because of Corona. So we have to keep moving. And then the first point that's going to get the sun is right here. It's Inishowen Head in County Donegal. On the other hand, as the sun is leaving, we need to find our last point, and it's going to be leaving somewhere like here. And then our last point is going to be right here, which is going to be Iny Head in County Mayo. Welcome to Inisheven Head. All we have to do now is wait for the sunrise. This is sped up footage of the sunrise. All we have to do is look for the sun to show up above the horizon, to start the clock, and enjoy the weather. And now let's see how many things we can get done with the longest daylight day. Visit a nature park. See a castle. See a waterfall. Discover a beach. Drive through a mountain pass. Learn the origin of Irish word for rod. Wait, what? Oh, I guess it makes sense. It is still June 21st. The time is just past 22 hours. And this is Any Head, County Mayo, as we're preparing to wait for the sun to set. This is sped up footage of the sunset. Unfortunately, because of the clouds over the horizon, we will not be able to see the exact moment, but I know precisely when it's going to happen. And once it does, all I have to do is drive back to the place where I stay tonight and rest. Thank you for watching and enjoy the sunset.